So we're going to take just a little bit to then move on to checking and acting, checking in, seeing what we would do differently next time, because you'll never get it right. I don't know if, Professor Johnson, do you ever feel like you're completely done with learning about teaching? No. So, you know, you do this TA training once at Caltech, but you really never finish. It's okay. And that's like science and all the stuff that you do anyway.
Actually, it brings up an important point about learning that was, again, highlighted by that wiggling a magnet example. Why didn't they get it? Is that we learn through repetition. We have to spiral back to move forward. And so don't think of learning as some linear process. Your students aren't going to do that. You're going to be disappointed if you expect it to be a linear process. But if you accept that it's going to be this process whereby every 2 steps you move forward, you have to back up 1 step and do it again. Think back about your own experience with physics or biology or chemistry. You keep seeing things in new contexts, and it gives you a new opportunity to learn it. There's been so many times in my own life, even as a professor, where I keep seeing basic concepts, and I think, whoa, that's how that works. And so allow your students to do that too.
All right. Yeah. So, spiral, revise. Seriously. For those of you who were students just now, just take a second and then we're going to share back with your partner a little bit. Think about, did you get what the outcome was going to be? You can tell that back in a second. What was one thing that your teacher did that you really liked? Make sure to tell them. And then maybe make one suggestion for how you could have learned better. Teachers, I would like you to make sure you know, was your student able to do the thing that you wanted them to do at the end? Did you see the verb happen? It's okay, either way, but what was one thing that you actually liked about what happened in the teaching-learning interaction? And what would you want to change about it the next time? So take a second to think about that, have a short conversation back and forth so you get that feedback, and then we'll move on. Google Docs and quick feedback?
Yeah, so modern technology, right? There's, actually, I want to make 2 comments. One about actually technology. You can use technology really for, as long as you're keeping your goals in mind. I think a lot of people like to use technology, like you hear all this stuff about whiz-bang clickers and things like that, and it can be almost like a Michael Bay movie where using CGI as like the primary thing, and it's just like lame. You can really use technology in a really good way, in sort of a Lord of the Rings way, so it actually kind of enhances the story and helps people with learning. So, and one really amazing tool that you can use, one basic thing, you can show a YouTube video of the topic that you're talking about before the class as they're coming in. I found that showing really fun videos of like OK Go with the musical instruments with card writing down. If you're showing that video, it kind of gives them an incentive to show up on time. And they know that they're going to get to see something fun and talk about it a little bit, how it pertains to physics and astronomy. The other thing that's really useful for feedback specifically is Google Docs. Google Docs are the most powerful, amazing thing for this, because you can create a survey that you can copy the embedded HTML and put it right onto the web page. And then what you do is you just encourage your students to give you continual feedback. And the feedback is just simple, 2 questions. What's one positive thing that I've done? What's one really good thing that's helped you with your learning? And then what's one suggestion that I can make my teaching better? And then encourage your students. Tell your students, please, please, please fill out my survey. It's just 2 questions long. It's going to take no time for you. And your feedback will go immediately into making this class better for you. And then just keep repeating that message. I want your feedback. Give me your feedback. Be harsh on me. Also please be positive. And these things are really powerful. After you're done with your surveys, Google Docs immediately produces all kinds of figures that just show you all the analytics of what it went into this. You can customize your whole survey. It's really powerful. So this is one way that you can use technology in the Lord of the Rings way.
So, and we're actually going to, offer some other opportunities for you to come back before mid-semester and actually design some more formal mid-quarter surveys, but there's no need to wait. It could be at the end of a class, it could be after the first week, after the second week. Yeah, and you just saw, it wasn't the end of the world. It's great to get feedback. Once you're watching, you're already getting that information back. So I think there's like another pair, right? So one of you taught, one of you didn't. We're going to go ahead and go through this again and swap roles, because I know that other lesson is just as equally compelling and amazing, and you've been waiting for it. So 5 minutes begins now. teacher are more for you to think about and reflect on as the student and as the teacher. But go ahead and share, think about, and then share one positive and one suggestion or one change that you would like to make. Reminds you, because it sure looked like there was some excitement and passion out there when you both times started into your 5 minutes. The level of gesture, image, explanation, excitement, and passion was just huge in the room. And I hope that you'll bring that into your classes, into your labs, into your mentoring, and ultimately into your careers as future scholars and researchers and potentially academics and professors and public policy makers and all the rest. Here's a shameless plug. So as Joe mentioned this morning, Caltech is really paying attention in new ways to teaching and learning. And my position on campus is brand new. This year, we're going to be starting up a Center for Teaching and Learning. It's all lowercase right now, unbranded, which means that you have an opportunity to give your input into what this center should be and do. It will work with TAs, graduate students, faculty, undergraduates to really highlight and bring new innovation to the teaching and learning environment at Caltech. It's going to be, I think, well, pretty exciting for me, but hopefully for you as well. And one of the things that I've certainly seen elsewhere is that, I know you all will be getting feedback on a daily basis because you're going to be observing your students learning. You're going to be asking them those 2 short questions at the end of a class or at the end of a week. But around mid-quarter time or before mid-quarter time, it's sometimes a good idea to get kind of a more comprehensive set of feedback from the class. So well before mid-quarter on October 22nd, we're just going to host a workshop, free lunch, where we will actually figure out what kind of feedback your recitation or your section, or if your professor is into it and you're a TA, you might help design a feedback system for the whole class if that's of interest. So you'll get a chance to design a survey using Google Docs or another format, and really think through then. The tricky part sometimes is how to interpret the feedback, because you will get mixed messages back from students at times, and then really importantly, how to bring that back to the students so that the loop, the whole feedback loop gets completed, and they know that you're listening as a teaching staff, and that either changes are being made or that there's a reason why we're going to continue down a particular path. That's really important. So you can go to the website, you can RSVP, and I will buy lunch for you that day if you want to come back for it. All right. So hopefully we have done some of these first three to some extent. Are we up for some bonus, like fun research findings about teaching? Oh, I'm getting a resounding yes. Okay. So fun finding number one, prior knowledge matters. Like ghosts haunting students, and this goes all the way back to some really interesting work in physics, actually, from McCloskey in the 1980s. Students come in with ideas about the world, and some of them are wrong. So McCloskey's work on circular motion had a kind of a diagram of circular motion on a string with a weight at the end, and a point in the diagram where they asked students to then predict, if we cut the string, what will the rest of the motion be? Turns out that students don't get that right. And I mean, your students will, of course. But in general, students coming into college have these fundamental misconceptions about the world. Perhaps they didn't learn it and they just kind of picked it up from the world, and we know that we can get a lot of erroneous theories happening about the world around us, but sometimes it's the result of kind of textbook teaching earlier on. But what the research shows is that we have kind of a job to do to undo misconceptions and prior knowledge at times before we can help build the kind of the more accurate theories of the world. So that's just a little fun finding, that when students are getting it wrong persistently, sometimes it's not about you not teaching it well or them being obstinate and really difficult. Sometimes it is really that these theories are persistent. And so your challenge is then to find ways to get them to see that their theory isn't working anymore, which is where your verbs come in, and getting feedback and observing what they're doing come into play. So these are the kind of little things to keep in mind because you might see them with students. Fun finding number two, knowledge organization. So I feel like walking around, but then I think you won't be able to hear me. It's just really hard to stand here. Do you ever find that? Okay, can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, underneath the microphone. All right, so knowledge organization. This is one of the things that I find really just fascinating about the research on learning. It turns out that knowing more changes the way you know. You say it again. Knowing more changes the way that you know. So when we were hearing earlier about John Johnson rethinking fundamental concepts in his field and being hit with a question about something really, really basic, going, wait, why do we assume X? Wait, how does that actually work? It's actually a really normal human thing. Because as we grow in our expertise, our brains are pretty awesome in that they will make as much of what we have to do as automatic as possible. Are you in like neuroscience or something? No, but I'm getting good nodding. You're having a really good signal about that fact. We would kind of automate so that we can ignore and do the more complicated thing. It presents us with a real quandary as teachers, because we're so good at reorganizing our knowledge that we no longer see what it's like to be a novice learner. We actually don't see it, right? So it's a challenge to unpack our learning, but one of the key things that you can help students do is to articulate how you are organizing your knowledge. Because for them, sometimes it's about, like, it's in chapter 1, therefore I'm doing X. It's in chapter 2, whereas you're saying, like, the on these differences in how experts organize and operationalize their knowledge were done with expert and more novice, but intermediate chess players. So it turns out that the experts, how many of you play chess? A few people, are able to look at a board and see like the next 20 moves to get to checkmate just from the way the pieces are arranged. It becomes really automatic. In the same way that those of you that are who are biologists and organic chemists probably see functional groups when you look at molecular arrangements, whereas some of the rest of us see like atoms and lines and things like that, right? And the same way that those of you who are physicists, when you look at that block and plane and friction problem, you are probably seeing conservation principles at play. Others are using like blocks and planes and things like that. So that's fun fact number 2, that your students are organizing their world in your classes in completely different ways. Find out how they're organizing it and help them get to a more expert way of organizing their knowledge. It'll help them, it'll help you, and they're not just being difficult. Okay, fun fact number 3 is that there's tons of research having been done and being done now on the role of motivation in learning. It's enormous. So the emotional part, much as we want to be really dispassionate and objective about our learning, it's like being that lonely ladybug, right? It actually matters. The climate that you create in the classroom, the reason that the students this morning were talking about the importance of going to the red door or being invited somewhere or knowing that the TA really cared about them is because fundamentally our emotional state when we're learning makes a difference about our retention, our ability to perform. So doing all these nice things is not just about being a nice human being and a good person. It is actually about enhancing learning. And so what the findings show is that striking a balance between challenge and support is really, really important. To be engaged and motivated, we need to feel like we're stretching. To be engaged and motivated, we need to know that we're being supported to stretch and grow. So again, it's something that feedback is going to help you judge whether you're striking that balance. Fundamental thing, this is one like doing the chalkboard, back and forth, or up and down. Just get to know your students' names. It will help with motivation, and it really does matter. And then they won't be like totally ladybugs, but they'll, sorry, I had to do that. Okay, so I think we're at the end of this hour. Thank goodness you're like, thank goodness the hour's over. But coming soon are here already. I wasn't sure as of last night what would be where. But we do have some really great resources coming for you. This PDF, like I said, is already on teachlearn.caltech.edu. Here's another little fun fact. Lots of our websites will look different on Monday. So don't be freaked out when you go back to caltech.edu and it has a completely different look. There's a web redesign in the works. So that site is pretty bare bones at the moment because I didn't want to put a lot up and then have to redo it. But it's there under links. On its.caltech.edu/CPET, there are lots more resources from the Caltech project for effective teaching, which we're going to hear a little bit about in a second. Seminars coming up, really great opportunities for you to grow as a teacher and be ready for your ultimate, when you're getting ready to send your CVs and your applications out for potentially down the road academic positions. They have some fantastic resources and we're going to work really closely together. And then, drum roll please, we actually have a new TA handbook for you that's going to be online as a PDF. People clapped. Did you hear that? Did you plan that?
People or was it?
It was like, I'm going to go with people. So the TA handbook will be really, really good. Okay, so last thing I have to say is that Professor John Johnson mentioned this workshop that he went to for new faculty members. I'm going to be doing that in a few weeks, and I'm using this book called Advice for New Faculty Members. It's pretty obvious, right? But some of the things that are in here about quick starters as new professors are that I had a part in here that I was going to read. that they do a lot of their survival work, which they were defining here as such as teaching and writing, in brief, regular sessions, which means that they plan time to dedicate to these things that really need to happen on a regular basis, and they stick to that time. So when you start teaching here, it's going to take you a little while to figure out what amount of time is the right prep for you for a recitation or a lab. But once you figure that out, schedule it and stick to it. It shouldn't go on and on and on for hours, and it shouldn't be 5 minutes before, but somewhere in the middle is a reasonable amount of time that is going to make teaching as rewarding and effective and reasonable as it can possibly be for you. So I really encourage you to do what successful new faculty do now and start to plan for that. So, happy teaching, and I think I'm going to turn it over to Felicia and Noel. Thanks, everybody.